What's up, everybody? David Wilson here, back with another installment of the Emacs from Scratch series. So in the last episode, we covered the basics of the org mode package, which is a pretty popular package for Emacs. You hear about it a lot whenever anybody tries to sell you on the idea of using Emacs, as it's like this amazing thing that can do so many different things to help you, organize your life, etc. Well, in this episode, we're going to actually go into detail on some of these features that people always talk about, and try to just show you a variety of things that you can use to, plan your projects, track habits, track things you want to measure, write journal entries, capture quick ideas that you have. There's so many different things that you can do with org mode, and we're going to jump in and try to cover as much of that as we can in one sitting. If we don't get to cover everything, I might have to make some separate supplemental videos or something. But at any point, just please feel free in the live chat to ask questions. Hey, Kickbuttaski, nice to see you. And also, one thing that is new in this stream is that YouTube has bestowed upon me a new feature for live streaming, which is the super chat feature, which is basically a way for you to make a donation to the stream to support the stream, but also be able to attach a question or a comment or anything to it. So if you feel so inclined to support the stream, please hit the super chat button, and it'll take you through the process or whatever. And before we get into the content, I want to talk about the viewer questions that I received since the last time. Let me pop over to the editor screen. So the first one was from Christopher Balentona, and he asks, basically, in the last stream, we talked about visual fill mode and visual line mode, and he wanted to know how those things relate. Basically, does visual line mode actually truncate the end of the strings in the buffer, or does it do virtual wrapping? Well, the answer to that is that there's two ways to do wrapping of text in Emacs. One is I think it's called autofill mode, and what autofill mode does is it will actually break the lines of your code and insert new lines. So whenever you have gotten to the end of the line on the screen, it will drop down to the next line whenever you reach a certain length of the line. Where visual fill mode actually will do some of Emacs display tricks to make it look like the line has been broken, but actually has just been visually wrapped. So the combination of the visual fill mode actually makes the screen narrower to kind of take up less horizontal space, and then visual line mode causes the lines to wrap. So this is really just an aesthetic thing, or a thing to make your screen more visible, and visual line mode does not actually cause any of your content to be changed. So that's just a nice thing that you can know about Emacs. Another question was from Konstantin Petrov. He asks, he uses tags in org mode. Can we talk about how to use Ivy and Council to set tags on org mode items? And also, can we cover org capture? Well, we're going to cover both of those things today. So let's just get right into the org mode content, and we will see what we see. All right, let's pull up our Emacs from last time. We've been working on the same configuration file, so we're just going to add some more things to that. And once this loads up, I'll full screen it. Okay, so now we're in our customized Emacs. And by the way, I want to remind everyone that the code for this configuration can be found on my GitHub profile under the Emacs from Scratch repo. So if you go to github.com/davywill/Emacs from Scratch, you'll see all of the configuration that we've been working on so far. And everything that we do today, I'm going to check into this repo later. So if you want to play around with some of the org files or the configuration to see how things work, you can do that there. All right. So let's go back down to where we were configuring org mode the last time, and we're going to go back into the use package org block where we were configuring org mode from the beginning. And the first thing I want to do is to talk about how you might start to set up some org files to track various things in your life. First of all, the number one thing that you might think of is, well, I want to track my to-do list, the things that I want to get done. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a file called tasks.org. And I'm going to make a subfolder for this, org files, tasks.org. So now it's going to open the new buffer, and we have the helpful message at the bottom saying that I need to create the directory. So I'm going to use the make directory command to create that. And now I can go ahead and start. Let me kill my panel real quick. I'm sorry for that. I'm going to go ahead and start adding some tasks, but let me kill my panel first so that it doesn't get in the way. I'll turn up this volume a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead. So one thing that is kind of nice to do is to be able to separate which tasks are active versus things that are in your backlog. So things that you're actively supposed to be working on versus the things that you want to work on in the future. And I'm going to create a task here. Let's say finish documentation, something very generic. So, it's nice to be able to have a file where you can have all of your tasks that you want to do. Let's see, merge the PR. But whenever you start to have a lot of these tasks, it's kind of nice to have a view where you can keep track of everything in a more meaningful way. So org mode has this thing called the agenda, which is a view that will aggregate all of these sort of to-do list items and scheduled items you have in all of your org files so that you can look at them all in one place and manage them appropriately. So I am going to pull up the agenda. If you just run the org agenda command, and first you're going to be greeted with this panel that gives you a lot of different options. And for now, let's just assume that the only thing we're going to care about is the first one there that says A, agenda for current week or day. If I press A, it doesn't really give us anything, but that's because we haven't configured the agenda yet to know about the org file that we had just created. So the best way to do that is actually in your configuration is to set the org agenda files variable. So we're going to go do that right now. So inside of our org configuration block, we are going to say set q org agenda files, and we're going to use a quoted list. And for those of you who don't have any experience with Lisp, a quoted list is basically just a way to say this is a list. This little single quote in front of the parentheses just says this is a list, treat this as a list and not as a function call. So what we're going to do is drop this down to another line, and I'm going to add the full path to the file that I just created. So projects, code, Emacs from scratch, org files, tasks.org. And then I'm going to use, and let me pull up my command window, global command log mode. Okay, now you should be able to see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to hit Control X, Control E to evaluate that, and that configuration should take effect. So let's go back over to task.org, and then I can run org agenda again, press A, and now we still don't see anything. But the reason why is because we haven't actually scheduled a task to show up in the agenda. So scheduling a task basically says, I want to address this task on a particular date. And there's also another thing you can do where you set a deadline on a task to say, like, this task must be done by a particular date. So for this finished documentation, I'm going to say I want to schedule it for tomorrow. So I'm going to use the org schedule command, and it brings up this nice little calendar view at the bottom of the screen. And you can use the arrow keys. Well, actually, I think it's shift and arrow keys. Hold shift and use the arrow keys, and you can pick the date that you want to schedule the task. So I'm going to pick tomorrow, which is the 10th. Press enter, and you'll see now that it added this extra line called scheduled with the date. And this is a string that's formatted in a very specific way that org mode knows how to process and interpret as a scheduled item. Let me actually increase the text scale here because it's probably a little bit too low. That's probably too big. All right, let's go with that. Okay, so now we have the scheduled item. If we save this buffer and run org agenda again, then we can see now for Saturday we have a scheduled task. So now we can start to see where org mode can help us to keep track of everything that we have scheduled in these tasks that we have in our org mode files. Similarly, if I were to run the org deadline command, I can also set a deadline. So let's say I set the deadline for Monday on that, and I save the file. And this time, instead of running org agenda, I'm just going to run org-agenda-list, which would jump us right to that same view that we were seeing before. And now we can see that there is a task listed for today, but it's actually the task that's due in 3 days. So if you set a deadline on a task, it won't show up in your agenda view until it's almost, I think maybe within 5 days before it's due, and then it will start showing up in your agenda, basically to remind you, hey, this thing's due, so don't forget about it. There is a variable, I think, for setting that, org deadline. Let me see if I can actually find it because I don't remember org deadline. Missed deadlines, days. Is there a days? Yeah, warning, org deadline warning days. So this variable, you can set it to a particular number of days before expiration during which a deadline becomes active. So apparently 14 is the default, so like 2 weeks before the task is due, you will start getting notifications about that. in your agenda, but you can set that to 5, you can set it to 3, basically whatever you want. So that's another thing that makes it configurable for you. All right, let me jump to my notes real quick and see what next. So there's some other things you can do that make the agenda view more useful. So I'm going to pull these configuration lines over to our Emacs and put them in the config. So I'll tell you what each one of these does. So org agenda start with log mode. I wonder if that's on by default. Let's just check it real quick. So Control HV. I think I've knocked out the command mode again. So org agenda start with log mode is nil by default, but we want to set it to T because what it does is that it will present a log of basically what you've been working on and the things you've been doing today. So like if you have scheduled like a scheduled appointment at a certain time, it will show you in this sort of daily planner view. And if you complete tasks and you log them a certain way, they will also show up in the view. So you can kind of see like the process of your day. So I'm going to run this to turn it on, and I'll turn our command log mode back on. And then I will go run the org agenda list command again. And so far we don't really see anything, but that's because we haven't done anything yet. So let me jump back to the task.org buffer. And well, let's just go ahead and finish this documentation task. So if I hit Control-C, Control-T, it will change that to done. And if I run org agenda list again, well, we see that the task is done, but we don't actually see the log. And the reason why is because we have not tracked the actual date and time when the task gets completed. So that's another configuration variable we have here for org log done. So org log done basically says whenever I complete a task, I want you to do a certain thing with it. And if we look at the documentation for this, the possible values are nil, which is basically don't do anything. There's time, which is add a timestamp to the task. And then there's note, which basically says I want to add a note anytime I complete a task. Just ask me for a note, and it will be stored with along with the task body. So I'm going to just store the time for now so we can see it in the log. And I'm also going to use this org log into drawer variable, which basically says I don't want to see a whole bunch of log entries under my task. I want you to fold it into a collapsible drawer. And I'll show you what that looks like if it works, because sometimes it doesn't work. Or at least it didn't when I was trying it this morning. So I'll jump back over to our tasks file. I will switch back to an active state for the task, and then I will make it done again. And this time we can see that it was closed at a particular date and time. And if we were to go back and look at our agenda list again, now we can see that the log shows up for Friday, and we see that we closed this finished documentation task at 9:30. So that's just one way where you can kind of keep track of what's going on in your day based on all the things you're doing in your org mode files. So let me know if I'm moving too fast, because that was kind of like a really quick scan through just like the basics of org agenda. So I'm going to jump over to the questions real quick. So Kik Batowski says, org drill as a replacement for Anki. Well, I haven't used org drill very much, but it's something I will definitely cover, maybe in like a one-off video or something in the future, because it is interesting. Captain Nobeard says, do I use org QL for anything? I don't actually know what that is. So how about we just look it up real fast and see what we can see what it is. Org-QL. Org query language. Yes, I've heard of this actually. Now I remember based on this, because this is done by Alpha Papa, who is a very prolific package author in the Emacs community. So org QL basically makes it easier to define queries for org task items. I haven't used it yet, but that is something that would be nice to cover later, because as you'll see as we go through the stream, defining org queries for agendas is a little bit hard to manage. So this package does actually have some benefit. We'll talk about that later. Also, Captain Nobeard asks, you may prefer to use packages custom keyword to set org agenda files rather than set Q in config. It's a good habit to get in for customizable options because it can avoid problems. I agree with this point, because oftentimes packages will have variables that are set for customization, and the customization may have extra functionality that goes along with it. So it can be good to use custom instead, and it's cleaner too, because the custom syntax, if we go back to our init.el, let's close this out. Custom, yeah, it just allows you to do key value pairs instead of doing all these set queues like I'm doing. So I agree with that. Also, Kik Batowski says a video explaining my recording setup would be useful. One day I'll be happy to do that. So let's jump back over to my notes. So that's all great for like scheduling tasks. But there are other ways you can use the org agenda and not with just scheduled tasks. What we can do is look at one of the other org agenda views. So if we look at these other items, T goes to a list of all to-do entries. M matches a tags query. S searches for keywords. So it gives you a lot of different ways to sort of slice and dice all the stuff that you have in your org files to look at them more effectively. We're going to just hit T first to get the list of all tasks. And this will just pull all of the to-do items that are not in a done state in your org files. So now we see that merge the PR is pulled up because the finished documentation task is already done. I believe if I type 2R, this will look for all done tasks. So if you just follow the instructions at the top of the buffer, it will give you a way to filter the tasks that are visible. I can also do 0R and it will give me all, but apparently it's not giving me the done items, which is interesting. There is another way to get things sort of showing up in your agenda. So let's say, for instance, you want to track people's birthdays. Like if you're really bad at remembering the birthday of your family members or your friends, let's see if we can find a way to solve that problem. So I'm going to open a new buffer called birthdays.org. And I'll say, let's just make a heading called family. And I'm going to make a new item for Joe. And for Joe, we want to set we don't want to set a deadline or a scheduled item for this because we're not scheduling his birthday. We're just saying we know that his birthday is on this particular date. So to do that, you can say org. You can run org time-stamp, which is bound to the Control-C period key binding. And let's say that Joe's birthday is on October 10th. And for some reason, org mode decided they wanted to insert the date right into the middle of the heading. So let's move to the end and maybe do that one more time. Org timestamp, move it to the 10th. All right, so we've got this timestamp. I'm just going to drop it down to the next line for cleanliness. So if we were to go back to our org agenda list, it's not showing up yet because we haven't added this file to our org agenda files. So I'm going to jump back to init.el. No Wayman says sorry. Okay, I'm sorry that I don't understand. Let's see. Let me go to the org agenda files I have here. I'm going to add a new item to this list. Let me just clean that up a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to add birthdays to this list, and I will use Control-X, Control-E. And then we will go back to our org agenda list. And now we can see that we have an entry here for birthdays for Joe. So now we see that basically it's not treated like a task. It's just an item, and it shows up in our agenda, which is kind of helpful for this case. But what if we remember, oh yeah, so Joe wasn't born in 2020. He was born in, let's say, 1990. So let's go back to birthdays. We can actually set this date to 1990. But if we go back to our agenda list, we see that Joe's birthday is no longer visible. And that's because 1990 was a long time ago, and it's not going to show up for this week's agenda. So we can use another feature of org mode for this called, I think it's, what do they call it? Repeated tasks. And basically it's just a little extended syntax for these scheduled dates and times, or just timestamps, where you can say +1 Y. And that says every year, like every 1 year, this task repeats. So we could also say every 1 day, every 1 week. You can do like every 2 years. You can do all kinds of different combinations of that. There is documentation in the org mode manual that will explain to you all the different syntax you can use for this. But now that we have set that as a yearly recurrence, I can go back to my org agenda list and see that Joe's birthday shows up here. And then every year at October 10th, his birthday will show up again. So you can basically just go through and add all of your family members and friends as birthdays and just have them set up with simple timestamps like this. I'm sorry I can't read your name in Cyrillic, but the question is if org mode can initiate OS notifications. Yes, I'm not going to cover it in this stream. However, you can use the org Wild Notifier package. I believe that's what it's called. I've used this in the past and it works pretty well. So org Wild Notifier will allow you to use org alert or org notify to show desktop notifications for things in org mode. So that could be really helpful if you want to actually have pop-up notifications in your OS, either in Linux, Mac OS, Windows, for things that are coming soon in your org mode files. So that's a good thing to know about. So also Lee Wang asks, could use CX escape ESS to re-add the timestamp. That's, let's see, if it's CX, Control X, escape. Oh, escape is a prefix here. And then repeat complex command. All right. Well, oh yeah, probably he's saying escape to re-add the timestamp. So apparently Emacs has a built-in way to run a command again, repeat complex command. I've never used that before. That's pretty interesting. So let's go back to what we were speaking of. So yeah, now we see that we have a couple different org mode files that have different purposes, and we have different kinds of information in them. Some of the stuff is scheduled that shows in the agenda, some of it is not. So now, like, let's think about how else we might want to use to do items in org mode. So let's say that you are the type of person who has a lot of things to do, and you want certain of your to-do list items to have more of a precedence in terms of how soon you process them compared to others. Maybe you are the type of person who likes to read productivity books, and you've read the book Getting Things Done by David Allen, and you've heard about this concept of next actions. So if you wanted to represent the idea of next actions in org mode, what you could do is create a new task state to go along with to do and done for your next action task. So if we were to go to this merge the PR item and type next, you can see that it's not being highlighted. And that's because org mode does not recognize this as a task state yet. So we're going to figure out how to do that now. So let me go and grab this configuration I've got here, and we'll pop back over to our configuration in our custom Emacs and lay that out. So we're going to set this org to do keywords variable. And if you go to the documentation for that, it basically is just, it says it's a list of to do entry keyword sequences and their interpretation. So there's a lot of documentation here that explains how this list works, but the idea is that you can have multiple sequences of states that represent a particular workflow, I guess you could say. So the first list I have here says there's a sequence where there's a to-do state, a next state, and a done state. And we have this other string in between that has the pipe character, which basically says anything before that entry are active states, and anything after that are completed states. So now we're saying that the to-do and next state are active states, and the done state is a completed state. And inside the parentheses for each of these, we have like a hotkey for that, so that when we go to our state switching selector, it gives us like a menu basically saying we can press one letter to set any of these, and you'll see what that looks like in a second. Kik Batowski asks if the suggestion from Lei Wang was like the dot operator in Vim. Yeah, it seems like sort of like that. Basically, if you press the dot in Vim, it repeats an action. The Control X escape seems to do a similar thing for Emacs. So I also have here a second sequence, which I've used in the past. I don't really use right now, but I've used it in the past to be like a project planning set of states. So basically I can say a project's on the backlog, it's in planning, it's ready to be active, it's active, it needs to be reviewed, it's waiting on something that can be completed, or I put it on hold like it's in the backlog, and then like completed or canceled. So we won't really go into depth on this whole flow yet. Maybe in a separate video we can talk about this kind of thing, but it just shows you that you can have different sets of states for different types of tasks, just depending on what the context is. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this bit of configuration. And then if I go back to our tasks.org, and I'm going to run org-mode just to reset the state of this, you can see now that next is highlighted. And I will scale the text one more time just to make it visible. Now next is highlighted, so now it is recognized as an actual state for a task. And if let's see what happens if I try to reload the agenda that shows me all tasks of a particular type. So list of all to-do entries. If I press T, now I see a lot more entries here for all the things that I've added. And if I want to look for all the next pet tasks, let's actually put a another random to-do. So let's add a to-do for buy milk. So let's go back to our agenda and hit T again. So now we see the 2 tasks, next and to do. But if I wanted to filter only by next, I could press the number 2 as shown here, and then press R, and then it will show me just the next action tasks. So if you wanted to just see whatever your next actions are, you could do that pretty easily. Let's see. So now that we have our own custom to do, we might think about like, how can we make our own custom agenda view so that we can get to that much more easily. Maybe we can bind it to a key binding so we can just pull up our next actions all the time. So we're going to go into what making a custom agenda view looks like. And the configuration for this gets a little bit hairy because there's a lot of nested lists, but it's not that bad. And there are other packages like the one that was recommended by Captain NoBeard, the orgql, that can make this easier. So we're going to go ahead and copy this huge block of config over to our init.el. And I'm going to try to drop it in here, but the indentation may bite us. Let's see. Okay. All right, I'll indent that a little bit. All right, we'll see if this works. Okay, so what we're doing is we are setting the org agenda custom commands variable. And if you go to the documentation for that, it gives you a lot of details about what all the different parts of this are. I highly recommend, if you want to learn more about this, go to the org manual, because this is a kind of more complex topic and there's a lot of configuration you can do here. I've got a link to it here if you want to check it out, but if you just go to the org manual and search for custom agenda views, you'll find it. So what we'll see here is that I am defining a variety of custom agenda commands. And each of them are preceded with a letter that, as you saw when we go to org agenda, let's just press A or T, etc. You can define your own prefix letters for that. So we're defining one N for next tasks, and we give it a name. And we also say that this is a to-do list view for any to-do item with the next state. And then we're overriding the header to say next tasks. So we're basically just saying, we're making it look nicer. We can also define a dashboard. And I call it dashboard just because it kind of gives you an overview of things that matter to you. So you can say, give me the agenda, which is like that log view that we saw before. And also you can say, I also want to see a block for the next action items. And I also want to see a block for any projects that are marked as active. So we'll take a look at both of those in a second. In fact, let's just do that right now. I'll go ahead and run this big block. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that you can't run each individual little snippet inside of this whole thing. You have to run the entire block for the org agenda custom commands. I will admit that at times this can be tricky because you have to go to the end of the whole form and evaluate it. And you also have to make sure that you have balanced all your parentheses correctly. Otherwise, you're going to see errors, which can be a little bit stressful at times. But one thing that can help for that is if you run the check-parens command. If you have unbalanced parentheses, that often will point you directly to where you have a problem. So that can help you if you get into trouble with editing these structures. So now I'm going to run org-agenda, and we're going to see that I have a D for dashboard and N for next tasks like we had defined before. So if I hit N for next tasks, I'm going to get this simple view that basically just tells me what next task I have. So that's pretty handy. And you can set that up for any type of task state. And then let's see. Let's take a look at the dashboard. And for the dashboard, we see we have our agenda, and we also have the next task block, and we also have the active projects block. So if you want to like have everything in one place, like if you want to have a glance at what's going on in your day, like I want to see like what things are scheduled. I also want to see what my next tasks are. Maybe you have like another org file that has appointments that you want to kind of keep an eye on, or anything else that you care about. You can have individual blocks for those. And there's a lot of flexibility for how you source the information from these things. So you should definitely go check out the org mode manual to learn more about that. Some other interesting things you can do. You can do queries based on tags. So let's say I wanted to mark the merge the PR task as having a tag of work. So Constantine had asked how to do this with Council and Ivy. So I'm going to run the Council org tag command. And right now you can see in the mini buffer, it says tags, but we don't have any suggestions yet because we don't actually have any tags in this file. So if I just type in work and press enter, now you can see this item has the work tag attached to it. And if I were to go to org agenda and press W, the capital W for work, then we can see that I'm getting all headlines with tags matching work. And then we see that the merge PR task is there. So that's useful, but you could also go a little bit deeper with tag queries where you can say, I want everything with a particular tag, but I also want to exclude certain tags. Like for instance, if you have tags that sometimes get used together and you want to only focus in on items that have a particular tag and not other specific tags, you could do that. So let's say we'll have another to-do reply to John's email. And we're going to use cancel org tag. We see that the work tag is already here because it's already in the buffer. So I'm going to hit Alt-Enter. That lets me select that tag and continue to type new things. So if you press just regular enter, it will immediately complete and add the work tag. But if you hit Alt-Enter, it keeps the IV session open so you can continue adding more tags. So in this case, I'm going to add the email tag. So now we see that this item has both work and email as tags. And if I wanted to look at my list of work items again, I can open org agenda, hit capital W for work tasks, and I see that we have both of these here, but I want to get rid of the email tasks. So I'm going to go back to my init.el, and in this line where we've defined the work tasks agenda, I'm going to put -email. So it looks a little bit weird to have everything jammed together into one word, but this is apparently the syntax for how this works. You have to use plus a tag name to include it and minus a tag name to remove it. So now if I were to go back to the bottom of this set of agenda views and evaluate that again, then I can run org agenda and hit capital W for work tasks. And now I see that only merge the PR is there. So now we filter everything down to only the things that have work and not email. So that is nice for searching against tags. One other little thing to note about tags is that I believe that you can set a set of commonly known tags. If I were to pull up my Emacs config, let's see. Come on, let's go. Here we go. So org tag, let's see. Yeah, org tag a list. So here's a nice thing you can do. If I were to copy this configuration and let's see, let's go over to init.el and I will dump this in. So I'm going to take some of these out because basically I've put a lot of things in just for my own usage. But let's say, yeah, let's go with just this list for now. I'm going to evaluate this. And now if I go back to the org file we were looking at before, tasks, I can, let's see if council will pick it up. So I'm going to run council org tag. Now council org tag doesn't seem to pick it up. Let's see, maybe do I need to run org mode again? Let's try this. Council org tag. Okay, so now council org tag has picked up on the set of tags that that I've defined as commonly known tags. And I think that if I have tags in this file, it will also source the tags that are here that are unique to this file as well. But this gives us the ability to quickly search against the tags that we've defined as things that we want to use across our org files. There's also a command you can use for org, org-tag. Let's see. Trying to remember if I could do Control-C to bring up all of our key bindings in the Control-C set. Trying to remember, is it Control-C, Control-Q? Yeah, Control-C, Control-Q. So if you use Control-C, Control-Q, then that will give you your tags pop-up. And this is the pop-up that's actually part of org mode. So it may have a little bit better functionality for this kind of thing. So you can add in for note. This is something I did here. And in this view stays open while you're pressing letters for the different tags. So it can be easier to make tag additions really quickly. So if I hit P for planning, capital P for publish, and I can also toggle those by removing them with the same letters that I had set before. And if I hit return, then it accepts what I set there. So that's a way to set the set of tags that you might want to use across all of your files. So now, let's see, what was I going to do next? Let's look at another thing you can do with the custom agenda commands. So you can also do queries based on certain properties on tasks. So let's say you wanted to search by priority, or if you wanted to say like, I want to gather all the tasks that are like really low effort tasks. So if you want to batch things together that are going to take like 2 to 5 minutes, you could assign effort values to tasks, and then you can query based on that. And that's what this low effort next actions thing does. So to explain that, we're setting up a binding on E to tags to do. So we're going to query against tags, but it's going to be to do items. Well, both tags and to do, basically. So we're looking for a to do of next, so a to do state of next. We want a next action. And we also want to find an effort less than 15 and an effort greater than 0. So we want a task that has an effort attached, but also an effort less than 15. And in this case, I'm assuming 15 means 15 minutes. So it's really just whatever you think that it means. Also, we're going to show the header of low effort tasks. We're going to only show up to 20 tasks because we don't want to be inundated with a huge list of tasks because that might be stressful. So we're only going to show up to 20. And we are going to source this from our agenda files. So I am going to jump back over to our tasks. And let's say replying to John's email is going to take about 5 minutes. So to set the effort on this task, we can use the org set effort, actually. I was going to say use org set property. We'll use that first, and then we'll go use org set effort instead. So org set property gives you a list of common properties that you might want to set on an org item. And we can type in effort, and then we can type in a value for that. So let's just say it's going to take 5 minutes, and press enter. Now you get this thing here that they call a property drawer, and it's a special syntax in org mode that says inside of this, there's like key value pairs that can define information about your org items. And we see here that effort is set to 5. And these are collapsible as well, so you don't see them all the time, which is kind of helpful. So I'm going to try this other command, the org set effort. And it basically does the same thing. It just asks you the effort directly without you having to say you want to set the effort. So let's change it to 3. Maybe it will take less time than we thought. Also, buy milk. Since we have to actually go to the store and, pick up the milk, stand in line, etc., I'm going to set this to, let's say, a 20-minute task. So I'll put 20 there. So now we have effort set on 2 tasks. And now if I were to open my agenda, org-agenda, and then I pick, let's see, we can't see it, but if we use Control-N, we can scroll down. If I use the E that we set before, then it gives us our low effort task list. And interestingly, it doesn't actually show them. Oh, and the reason why is because they're not set as next actions. So let me set those to next actions and then run it again, press E. And now we see reply to John's email shows up because it has an effort less than 15, but buy milk does not because it has an effort of 20. So that's just another way that you can filter down the task you're doing or kind of improve your workflow by saying, I want to, kind of batch things together that are small effort tasks. Maybe you have a certain time per day that you want to schedule for doing that kind of thing. So that can be pretty helpful. Let's check the chat for stuff. Let's see. No Wayman says they've written an alternative, a much more maintainable, convenient syntax for defining capture templates. It's called github.com/procfolio/docT. I have heard of this, actually. I saw it on Reddit some number of months ago. So let's go look at that real quick. And this is why it's great to do this in a live setting, because people can just tell you things that you weren't going to cover, and you will be able to show them. So procfolio/docT. So if you want to go to this is for declarative org capture templates. And basically this, the typical org, okay, this is for capture templates specifically, but does it also do agendas? Probably just capture templates, but we're going to go over capture templates in a second, and that's going to also have a syntax that is harder to manage. So this is something that you could use to make that simpler. So that's a good thing to know about. So let's see. What was next? So I'll show you one more thing that you can do with agendas. So I'm going to pull up the workflow view that I had defined, the really long-looking one. And basically it gives us a whole bunch of different sections. So if you have defined a bunch of different states for a workflow for something that you do in your org files, you can set up an agenda that lets you break all those down into separate sections so you can kind of see the progression between those states. So you can think of it sort of like a Kanban board in a sense, but it's not like horizontal, it's more vertical in this sense. But If you have a particular workflow that you're going for that you want to move your tasks through, this can be helpful as a way to look at them in that way. So if you want to go back to the config for that, it's basically just a block or a list of to-do sections, all of them that are looking for different to-do states. So we've defined all those specific to-do states, and now we're making individual sections for all those and then giving them titles. So that's another thing you can do that could be pretty helpful. So I think that's all that we wanted to cover for agenda for now. But if there's other things that you can think of that you would like to see about for agenda, org agenda, let me know in the comments or in the chat, and then we might be able to cover them in a future video. So the next big thing about, oh, actually, one more thing before we get to that. I want to talk about refiling, because if you use org mode for a while, what you'll find is that you end up with a bunch of done items in your tasks file, or things that you don't really need to see anymore, and they're kind of getting in the way. So there's an easy way in org mode to move these. What I'm going to do is create a new file called archive.org. And I'm going to make a heading called October, because we're archiving things that came from October. We could also do November, December, etc. So what we want to do is when we finish tasks in October, we want to just move them from task.org to archive.org. And obviously one thing you can do is just cut and paste, basically just, select the line, delete them, and then move them over to the other file. But that's boring. Let's find a more efficient way to do that. So what we'll do is we're going to define our org refile targets, because if we were to, the command that you use for this is org-refile. If we run that, all we see is the headers in the same file, and that's really not really helpful because we're trying to move them to a different file. So you can define your refile targets to include other files aside from the current file by setting the org refile targets. So we're going to set this to our archive.org file, and you can also set this to other files. So actually, I'm going to set this to tasks.org as well, and I'll show you something about that too. So I think that's enough to balance those. So I'll run this, and then I'll explain this part in a second. So let's go back to tasks.org, and I'm going to run org refile. And now we see that we can see the headings from archive.org. So if I want to move this to October, I just press enter. And now it's moved that to the archive file under the October heading. So that's nice. But what we realize here is that the files that we moved things between didn't actually get saved. They're still in an unsaved state. So it's a little bit dangerous, because then maybe if you forget to save them and like Emacs crashes like once in a blue moon, or if something happens with your computer and you can't get back to your files or whatever, you'll have trouble. So we can use one of the nice core features of Emacs called advice to prevent any trouble from this. And what this means is that when we run the org refile command, we're adding a function that gets called after the org refile command. So anytime you run org refile, after that function completes, which means after we've finished refiling, it's going to run org save all org buffers. So this is basically a helper command from org mode that says, save all my org buffers right now, because if you live your life in org mode, you kind of want to have all that stuff saved pretty often. So we'll probably cover advice in another stream to go a little bit more in detail whenever we start talking about writing your own eLisp or Emacs Lisp. But for now, just keep this in your back pocket as something that could be really useful for various different things. We're just calling it advice add. We're saying we want to advise org refile, and we want it to save all org buffers. So I'll show you real quick how that looks. I'm going to move this back to the tasks file. So task.org back into active. Now we can see down in the mini buffer, it says saving all org buffers. So basically when we've refiled that, it did save the org files. And if we look at tasks.org, it's also saved. So that will save us some trouble in the future. So let's now look at what's next. So capture templates. Let me see what else I had to do here, because I want to make sure I get through this at least. So capture templates. This is a really, really useful feature of org mode. So I'm sure that like most of you who do work on the computer all day long. You're probably working on one thing, focusing on it, like you're trying to finish some coding work or write some tests or something. And a thought occurs to you, I should do something with this other part of the code, or I need to run an errand later or something like that. And you don't really want to break your flow, go open up another file, write down a to-do item, etc. You want to just like really quickly get it out of your mind and go back to what you're doing. Capture templates allow you to do this. A capture template basically is just like a quick editing sequence that you can bind to a key binding so that you can quickly add a task or write down some notes or track various things that you want to track, and it is incredibly useful, I find. So I'm going to just grab this whole block, and we're going to explain what these things do in a second. And let's bring them over to our configuration. Now I'm going to drop this after our org agenda definitions. And as you can see, the org mode configuration, if you're really doing things yourself, it can take up a lot of space because there's a lot of stuff going on here. Something you might want to break out into a separate Emacs Lisp file. That's something we can talk about another time whenever we have a little bit more time to do it. So whenever you define your org capture templates, you should go look at the documentation for this org capture. Wow, it actually isn't documented. That's interesting. Anyway, basically this is a list of lists, and you can see that there is a little bit of a structure here where T is a prefix character, and then there can be letters under that for the specific things that you want to do under T. So TT will capture a new task. It will put it into our task file under a heading called inbox. And then this clocked entry subtask, that's probably something we should talk about another time. In fact, I'll just take it out right now. Then we can create journal entries, we can do meeting notes, and other stuff. So we'll just go ahead and start with the basics, and I'll show you what it looks like before we start talking about the syntax. So let's run this. All right, so I think I must have forgot to take something out. I will move this real quick. I think this is for the journal file. I'll copy this string. Okay, let's run this again. Okay, so now, if you run the org-capture command, you're going to get this select a capture template menu. And you can see that we have our T prefix, our J prefix, just like we've set up in our org capture templates. So if I press T, then it will ask me for the template to use. I can press T again for our task. And it gave me an error saying that the heading it's looking for is not found in the file. Well, let me just go add that real quick. I'm going to add a heading called inbox in this file. And this is basically just like all of the random tasks that we're creating throughout the day that we want to come back and reorganize later. And I think that Emacs has locked up. There we go. So let's add inbox. Save that, and then go run org capture again, TT. Now, we get this pop-up window, and it tells us it's a capture buffer. We see that we have a to-do state, we have a timestamp, and we also have a link. So I'm just going to say, remember to commit configuration updates. And it says to finish this capture, hit Control-C, Control-C. To refile it, hit Control-C, Control-W, and to abort, hit Control-C, Control-K. So if I was like, let's not do that actually. I'm gonna hit Control-C, Control-K, and then it forgets about it. However, if I run org capture again, TT, say commit config updates, and hit Control-C, Control-C, it saves it, and you can see that this item is now in our inbox where we expect it to be. So that allowed us to really quickly capture a task, and it's also the important thing is that this works anywhere. So if I'm in the init.el buffer, and I'm, let's say, right here on journal entries, and hey Alex, and I run org capture again, hit TT, then it gives me another capture buffer, and we see this time that this link down below actually links us to where we were in the file. So I've got my capture template set up so that this %sign question mark is where the cursor gets placed in the capture template. I've put a new line in. The %sign U gives me this timestamp. The %sign A gives me a link to wherever I am in Emacs. So if you're in like like a file, like if you're editing a code file and you want to make a note to go back and do something later, this %A, I think that's one, right? Or is it %I? One of these two, you'll have to look at the documentation. We may do that in a second. We'll put the link to where you are in Emacs so that maybe if the task is related to that thing, then you'll know where to go back to it later. So let's say update journal capture template. And I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-C. And now we're back where we were. We didn't jump to the file, but if we were to go look at our task file, now we can see update journal capture template is here. And if we were to hit Control-C, Control-O to navigate, it will pull open our buffer to where we were whenever we created this entry. So this can be really helpful for, like, you know, working in a project or you're working on a document or something and you want to like get back to that from a task that you created. You can easily navigate back using that approach. Let's see. Let's jump into journal entries. So I use org mode for journaling a lot, and I'm using it with a feature called date tree. And what date tree does is it creates a special org mode file that has a structure that is based on the year, the month, and the day that you are creating the entry. So let's say I want to create a journal entry. I will hit org capture and then J for journal entry. And I will say today was a great day. We learned more about org mode. So now I'll hit Control-C, Control-C to capture this. So I've written my journal entry, that's done. And I will go to the new journal file in my org file /journal. And we can see that this file has a structure with the year and the month, and then the date basically, and then our journal entry. And in that journal entry, you can create subheadings. You can basically do whatever you want to do in there, which is pretty helpful for being able to structure entries. So like for me, whenever I write like a journal entry, I have like different things I'm thinking about that day. So I'll have different subheadings with all the content that I want to write about for that. Let's see, what else have we got here? So we're going to run the capture again. So you can do things like whenever you're checking your email, you can have an email checking thing that will go into your journal. So you're basically like writing down notes from checking email in case you want to get back to people or whatever you want to do. So I'll back out of this one because I don't care about that too much. You can also add entries to a table. So like if you're trying to track things like your weight or anything else that you care about, you know, weight, blood pressure, or like some like how many glasses of water you drink per day or something like that, you can also make a capture template for that. So if we go down to the metrics capture section that I defined here and look at weight, if you just use table syntax, like with the pipes to define the columns, then you can make a table entry. And then here we're doing a file plus headline. So we're saying in the metrics.org file, there's a headline called weight. We're going to insert this line under that, whatever is the last thing inside of that headline. So it's going to put in the date and time. It's going to ask us for the weight, and it's going to ask us for any notes. So if I were to run that capture template now, I'll do metrics capture weight. And now it asks me in the mini buffer what the weight is. I'm going to say 160. And it's also asking me for notes. So I'm going to say ate 3 hamburgers today. I feel great. So now it lets me confirm what I put in for this entry. So I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-C. And now I'm going to go look at that. Oh, I should mention, in this particular case, if you were to go look at what buffers you have open, the metrics buffer is not open, which is kind of nice because sometimes you don't really want the buffer to be open after you capture something. This kill buffer bit at the end is what tells org mode that once you make that edit to the buffer, close it because we don't really care if it's not already open. So let's just go look at our metrics buffer now. Org files, metrics. So now we can see that we have our table here with the information we put in, and we can easily add another entry to that by running the capture template again. Sorry, that was the wrong one. Org capture MW. Now we'll say we're 165, and I'll say shouldn't have eaten those burgers. And I'll hit Control-C, Control-C. You can bounce back over to the metrics buffer, and we can see that that's there. And No Wayman says Control-U, org capture goes to the last note stored. So Control-U is the universal key, and that ends up giving you lots of extra functionality to certain commands. So yes, that is a very useful tip. Thank you for that, No Wayman. So I think that let's see, is there anything else that I wanted to cover on, yeah, so there's one last thing I wanted to cover on capture templates, and that's how to set a global key binding to go directly to a particular capture template. So let's say that we want to write journal entries pretty frequently because we have thoughts throughout the day that we want to capture. We can say define key in the global map and say that we want Control-CJ to be the key binding for this. And then we're going to create basically a Lambda function that calls org capture and gives it the JJ, the JJ prefix. So if I were to run that and then hit Control-C, J, then it pops us directly into the journal capture template, which is very helpful if you do that. However, what I usually do though is I'll have a binding to org capture because they already have prefixes inside of this, which makes it really easy to just hit the prefix for whatever you want to capture at that moment. So you just need one key binding to org capture to make that happen. So that's another way to do it. So let's see, we've got a couple minutes. I'm going to do one last thing, a little bonus, and that is how to do habit tracking in org mode. So org mode comes with a built-in habit tracking system, a module called org habit, and it is not activated by default. So we're going to have to go and set that up. So what I'm going to do is drop in this configuration, and what it does is it loads the org habit Emacs package that comes with org mode. And then we're going to add org habit to the org modules list. So if you look at org modules right now, it has a few modules that are built in that are pretty interesting, but we're not going to cover those right now. And we're going to add org habit to it. So I'm going to run Control-X, Control-E, and then we can look at org modules again to verify that it's there. So now we see org habit there. We're also going to change the org habit graph column. Org habit, I didn't require org habit yet, so that explains why. So the org habit graph column, and this defines where, what column inside of your agenda view the habit tracker is going to show up. So I'm going to put this to 60 because I feel like it's a little bit narrow by default at 40. Also, we're going to run to, we'll create a new buffer called org files habit.org habits.org, and let's see. What can we say? Like brush my teeth. I mean, that's an important thing to do, right? We want to do that every day. So I'm going to schedule this task. Org schedule. I'm going to schedule it for today. But I'm going to use a recurrent syntax to say I want to do this every day. So you can say +1d. But you can also say, if it was a task that you want to do, maybe every 2 days, you could say +. 2 days. So I want to make sure I do this once every 2 days. Or you can also say 2d/4d, which says I want to do this once every 4 days, but make sure I do it no more than twice, basically. I think that's the way that syntax works. There's if you look up org habit in the org manual, it gives you the syntax for this kind of recurrent setting. But for now, we're just going to say +1d. And we're going to make this a to-do. And we also need to set the style of this. So we're going to use our org set property again. We're going to say style and set it to habit. So any task you want to be a habit, you need to set its style to habit. Otherwise, it won't show up in the list. So now if we go, we also need to add habits to the org agenda file. So let's do that real fast. So I'll just go add this here, add our habits. All right. And now if I go to our agenda, org agenda, press A. Now let me maximize that buffer. So we can see we have this nice little readout here on the right-hand side of the screen. And it doesn't really tell you much right now, but as you complete this task every day, it will tell you whether you've been staying on your habit or not. Right now, it basically says with the exclamation point that I need to do this. So I can say Control-T, Control-C, Control-D, make it done. Now it says it's done. And tomorrow, whenever I look at the same item in my agenda, it's actually going to tell me that I finished it yesterday and that I need to do it today. And if I break one link in the chain of habits, then there would be a little red mark saying that I didn't do it that day. So it's a nice little visual indicator to remind you that there's a thing that you want to do on a regular basis. So that could be really helpful too. I used that a lot in the past and it was pretty helpful. So that was a lot of stuff. I know we went through that in a hurry. If there's anything you want covered in more depth, I might do separate videos for those things. So definitely leave comments on the video after the stream is done. and we can cover those things. You could also file issues at the GitHub repo for the project. Let me see if I can get back there now. Do I have it open? Yes, I do. Yeah, you can file issues at this repo. You can leave comments on the YouTube video, etc. Please do that. It's really useful to get feedback from everybody about what they want to see next. Also, let's see. Yeah, next week we're going to do one last stream on org mode. We're going to talk about how to configure Emacs using org mode, sort of like how I do it with my configuration. Basically, you have an org mode file with your Emacs configuration in it, and you can make that work dynamically. D. Birch asks, is there a regular schedule for release? Yes, every Friday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific time is when I do my stream videos, and I might do other videos within the week if I have time. And he also says he's interested in my Geeks config, particularly in my EXWM setup. I'm definitely going to cover that. I think there's a couple more videos I want to do on Emacs, and then I'm going to jump over to how to use Emacs as a desktop environment, and also then cover how to use Geeks as like a complete system configuration tool. So that's going to be a lot of fun. All right, so one last thing I'd like to say is that recently one of my viewers kindly asked if they could support me financially to keep making these streams and doing this content. So I set up a GitHub sponsors page. If you go to github.com/sponsors/DavidWill, you can see more information about that. And I want to thank the couple of sponsors that I already have right now. Thank you so much for sponsoring continued work on these videos, because it's really encouraging for me to be able to see people liking it and continuing to support and watch more of the stuff that we make. So if you are interested in supporting, please take a look at that page. Also, yeah, just please come back again next time, and we'll have a lot more fun talking about Emacs and everything else. So once again, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.